Love helping your clients but hate sales and marketing, but somehow you ended up with sales and marketing responsibilities? Then this is the podcast for you. Hi, Chief Nerd Ruben Swartz here, and I spent a long time learning these lessons the hard way, and I want to help you learn them the easy way by sharing my experiences and talking with brilliant people who have figured out how to hack not just the code, but the sales and marketing process as well. Of course, as a nerdy person who hated struggling with complex CRMs, I had to create my own CRM for people who actually hate selling, which sounds like an oxymoron, but if it sounds interesting to you, check it out at Mimiran.com. That's Mimiran.com. And whether or not you need a new CRM, you'll find proposal templates and sample lead magnets to help you grow your business. Now let's get to it. Today, I'm excited to have with me Michael Greenberg, the founder of Gentlemen of Technology, a B2B venture creation and growth consulting firm specializing in B2B SaaS and service businesses. That sounds familiar to me, as well as personal advisory services for serial entrepreneurs. He launched his first independent venture, Call for Content, back in 2017, and that's a full-service podcasting agency for content marketing, audience growth, and monetization strategies. So hopefully he'll have a lot of great tips for me to run Sales for Nerds better. And then he's also launching some new ventures, and maybe we'll get into that in the interview. Michael, welcome to Sales for Nerds.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me today.
Now, of course, the first question is, what do you have in your glass?
So I've got some Bernheim Kentucky straight whiskey.
And how do you spell that?
Bernheim.
All right.
It's one of my favorite bourbons or whiskeys. It's wheated, which gives it a much smoother drink than what you'd think of as a traditional bourbon.
Nice. And I know that you had mentioned being more of a whiskey person than a wine person, and I really wanted to join you for whiskey, but it's still like 100 degrees here in Austin, and I just can't quite get into the whiskey yet. So
that's what the lemonade's for.
I've got this Cooper Jackson Pinot Noir from California, Jackson with Jaxon. It's just one of those nice, fruity, like $10 at Costco bottles of wine that just drinks really nicely, and you can drink it when it's still really summertime. So anyway, Michael, happy to have you here. Tell me a little bit about how you went from someone with an economics degree to somebody who's launching businesses, somebody who did a coding boot camp, to somebody who is helping entrepreneurs. What's your journey?
Yeah, so my journey really starts at birth. Both sides of my family are generations deep into entrepreneurship. My dad's family, on my dad's side, I'm a fifth generation entrepreneur, and on my mom's, going to be the fourth generation. So that it was the one thing I was told I couldn't do, but I think it's in the blood. Yeah, and I went to college like everyone else. I didn't like it, so I dropped out. Went to that coding boot camp, got hired by a startup, and went and did that startup thing. Lived in startup land, first in the Valley and then in the Southeast U.S. for about the next 2 years. Raised about $1.5 million with that venture. It ended up failing, but learned a lot along the way. Got into consulting afterwards, and then eventually went back and finished that economics degree. Make the family happy.
Yeah, when you were planning to go to college, did they know that you were going to be an entrepreneur?
No,
it
was literally, I was going to college to be a banker.
Got it. Okay. So you were trying to make your family
happy.
Freshman year,
interned in banking. Yeah. Did that whole thing. But in college, I had always had like a little side hustle going when I was in high school and middle school. And so when I got to college and I had a lot more time for those sort of side hustles, I started doing some day trading, and I really realized I was going to make more money working for myself than I could working for somebody else.
Now, a lot of families, they say, oh, you're the fifth generation doctor. Don't screw it up. You got to become a doctor. You've got this long line of entrepreneurs in your family history, and they were saying, don't become an entrepreneur? Yeah,
that is the drum that never stops getting beat. Entrepreneurship is super risky. It's if you already have some level of success, especially if you have enough after several generations, where something like becoming a doctor is going to have a high likelihood of giving you a very nice life for the rest of yours, then entrepreneurship loses a lot of its luster.
But
And so my family wanted the steady paycheck for me and my brother. And that's why we got pushed in that direction.
now, did he do the right thing and become a doctor, or is he an entrepreneur too?
He did not become a doctor. He 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 loved writing code from a very young age. Um, like had those Java textbooks that looked like you could kill a man with them
Right?
when he was 12 and 13. And so he went on to have a successful career in software development and architecture,
Got it.
some on his own, some with companies. But yeah, I'd say he followed more the favored path.
Got it. So now you've decided you're gonna leave the startup. It's time to do some consulting. How did you decide to start your own company, and how did you get your first clients?
First clients really just came about of people I knew at the time. I sent out a mass email saying, "Hey, I'm working for myself now. These are the things I can do." Somebody stepped up and said, "Hey, we need help with one of those things." I started out with more technical consulting, focused primarily around rapid prototyping for startups, for that like seed stage, very early company who just needs something to go raise money with, pretty much. That's who I focused on. So I would help them with the fundraising strategy and help them get that app to a showable point.
Okay.
That turned into go-to-market strategy and into more marketing. And over time, I realized it was just better to be on the side that generates revenue than on the development side.
Okay. And so how did you get into deciding to launch Call for Content?
I had been working with a couple agencies, and I had been working with a SaaS company, and they were all running into the same problem where they wanted to expand beyond the initial sales push that their founding team had made.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking generally to bring in a sales team and to get lead gen and marketing going all at the same time. I was like, man, I need a solution for this, because this is also the problem that I'm starting to run into
Right.
with my consulting business. And like, okay, what do we need to do here? One, we need to be positioned as experts, because for the service businesses, for the SaaS business, for whatever you're doing, people have to believe that you have either built the right solution to the problem or that you know how to solve the problem.
That makes sense.
That was the starting point. And so from that led me to content. Content turned into, hey, okay, how can we use this content to actually generate leads effectively and with some level of guarantee involved? And I was working with a podcast network at the time who focused on developing show concepts for B2B lead gen. And so that idea of how they develop podcasts got rolled in, and my non-compete wrapped up, and then Call for Content got started.
Got it. Okay. And so what was the premise behind that? I mean, everyone's saying content is important, but it sounds like you had a certain angle involving podcasting.
Yeah, so the premise behind that is and was and still is for many of the clients we work with, using a podcast to simultaneously position them as an expert in a niche field and use that podcast and the guests that we interview on that podcast to build them a network in that same field, in that same niche of high value clients.
Okay. So I'm probably doing this all wrong. Because I'm coming on here with a glass of wine and saying, gosh, I've made so many mistakes. Tell me what I should have done instead. And I'm not doing business development with the podcast. I've got some of my customers have been in past episodes, but I'm not using it for outreach. If I wanted to do it more strategically for business development, what would I be thinking about?
There's a few big things we like to think about when we're planning a show for this. One is we want to make it look professional. We want this show to be something worth sharing after being on it. And that's really important from a network perspective, because if we invite on 10 guests, we'd like that ideal prospect, whoever they are, to see one or two of those guests share their episode when they're featured. When we're doing that, we're looking at, okay, how can we plan a topic arc where we bring on a series of guests who kind of know each other and kind of know the same people already, so that when they share that episode afterwards, we actually get results. If we send an email outreach campaign to the list of the 1,000 companies we're targeting, and we've had on 30 of those companies VP marketing, and of those 1,000, maybe 400 or 500 see a post from one of those 30 episodes. Now we're suddenly getting at real market penetration. We're starting to see our presence develop. And so there's a big list building portion at the beginning of that to make sure that we develop a strategy around the content to penetrate the social network.
And by social network, are we talking Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, any of them?
None. As in the concept of you are a person, you have a social network.
The actual real social network.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll use a LinkedIn, we'll use Facebook, we'll use Twitter to help kind of map out who we're targeting.
So you've got like this 1,000-person-ish, just for the sake of argument, ideal market, and you're inviting 10 guests on the show who are going to know a fair number of people in that list. Is that right?
Yeah. So of that 1,000, let's say we mark out the 30 or 40 most influential on social media. Those are the people we're going to be inviting on as guests.
Got it. So you may not even know them. You're just saying, hey, Michael, you're an expert in using podcasting strategically. Why don't you come on my podcast?
Yeah. And so to put it all in perspective, Call for Content, the podcasting agency, we like to position ourselves as experts in the business of podcasting. So our first podcast is going to be a series of episodes interviewing the business minds behind various shows and networks.
That makes sense.
And the people we invite on are going to be ones with big newsletters and big Twitter followings or whatever else they have to make their presence known, so that when we have them on, people are like, oh, I've actually heard of that person.
So that makes sense. And I guess in some ways it's like, it's so self-referential that it's easier to visualize. What if you're like a random estate planning attorney, or you're a consultant who does Java development in Austin or something like that, right? It's not as obvious how to find the podcast. How do you think about this?
So the first thing we look at is who are the best clients? Who's the best group of prospects for us to be going after?
And by this, you mean the estate planning attorney's best prospects in this state, in this example?
Exactly.
Okay.
The estate planning attorney might not be a great example because our systems are really focused on B2B.
Okay, fair enough.
And that just the level of involvement in getting a sale with this strategy is very much based on a high touch, high ticket, high relationship sale.
Got it. Okay. So maybe a business attorney, or back to the Java developer or something like that.
Yeah. And wealth management we've had success with as well.
Okay.
So it more has to do with the final value of a customer than anything else.
Sure. That makes sense. You got to be able to justify the level of effort for a higher value of lower volume folks.
Exactly.
Okay. Sorry. I got it now.
Because we use totally different strategies for somebody like the estate planner.
Okay.
But let's talk Java developer, because this is near and dear to my own heart. That Java developer is first going to have to make a decision. Do they want to double down on their local area or focus on some other sort of niche for a remote show? And so let's assume that they really like working with people in person, and that's one of the advantages that their clients choose them over other options as a result.
Okay.
If that's the case, they want to do an in-person local show, and we'd likely recommend to them that they get a small mobile recording kit that fits in a backpack and then go record on site with their potential guests in a region.
Got it.
And so what they'd then do is, for a show like that, we'd be looking at a few different channels. One, we'd be reaching out to people who would be good fits to come on the show and being like, hey, would you like to come on in the region? And two, we'd be reaching out to meetups that would be specific to the topics they'd want to talk about, and asking if, one, they had any great recent speakers who would be good guests, and two, if they would be interested in having a live podcast recording at some point in the near future.
Oh, okay. That's cool. Now, when you sorry, go ahead.
Oh, our goal is really just to use that show to dig this developer into the local community for their buyers.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, suppose they go the other way and they want to do remote. They don't necessarily care about in person. In fact, they don't like it because then they're expected to show up at the office for 40 hours a week. How does the strategy differ if they're going remote?
Yeah, so going remote, we need to niche down more. you can't just be a Java developer in Austin, because in Austin is how you're niching down there.
Got it. And even that's probably too broad because there's like 500,000 of them, it seems like.
Yeah. And so let's say not just Java, but you specialize in Java Cobalt integrations.
Got it.
Which, if you're a Java developer out there, you can make fantastic money doing right now, because everyone who writes Cobalt is retired.
Listen up, people. There's the secret tip in this episode.
Yeah, they're like an actual real issue. If you wanted to be that guy, and that's a really specific niche, the only companies that are still that need that really are built on IBM mainframes. And so that's going to be finance, that's going to be energy. These are old, slow movers who would be purchasing that specific specialized service.
Okay.
And what we'd then do is we'd build our list of financial firms that have been about for we'd be looking at probably more than 30, 40 years. We'd be looking at energy companies in the same vein. And what we'd do is we'd then look at, okay, what are these companies already talking about? Well, digital transformation, major issue, right? That's always an issue with large organizations. Okay, let's niche down on that. Digital transformation when you're dealing with legacy systems. That's adjacent to the Cobalt Java integrations. That's talking about taking that sort of old code and making it into something that works now. But it's not explicitly about that topic. What we'll do then is we'll plan a show format, and we'll ensure that either before or after the show, the guest is made aware of what our client does. Our client will be the host of the show. And then we're just going to make sure they have a good conversation where they get to show off that they can talk the talk with that prospect. And so for a big enterprise slow sale like that, you let them know, yeah, that was a great recording. You mentioned that you were having difficulty getting some of your systems to really click with everything as you've moved to an open source architecture for most of your work in the cloud. I happen to specialize in Cobalt Java integrations for legacy systems. Let me know if you ever have need in that area.
So it's not a hard sell. You're not on the episode pitching. You're basically providing awareness that you exist and what you do, and then also establishing rapport personally and expertise-wise with the prospect.
Exactly. We like to call it the warmest cold intro you've got.
Got it. Okay. So it's kind of like the know, like, and trust thing. They don't know who you are, but they come on your show, they know you, hopefully they get along with you, and they like you, and then there's enough of a technical discussion there that they trust that you know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's really, this solves for know and like more than anything.
Got it.
And the trust is on you.
But hopefully during the course of you have a conversation for half an hour, whatever it is, it becomes apparent that you're not just blowing smoke.
Yeah, and that has to do with the way you format the show to begin with, to ensure that you have those opportunities.
Got it. Okay.
So maybe for the developer, it's about making sure that they bring in examples comparing to other work they've done in the space to talk about, hey, we had a really similar problem on this project a couple years back when XYZ happened.
You're just basically talking shop, like you're hanging out at the bar almost, having your wine and your whiskey.
It's my favorite kind of podcast.
So does that still fall under, you said the first thing is you had to make sure it's professional. Are we still professional here?
I think so. We're
Okay.
talking about business, and I have cursed way more in my professional life than I ever have in my personal.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, I'll try not to reduce you to cursing here, but you never know what's going to happen. So this makes a lot of sense to me, and it kind of makes me think, gosh, maybe I should be using Sales for Nerds much more strategically. But that aside, if someone's listening to this and thinking, gosh, yes, that sounds great, but it also seems like an awful lot of work. Like things like, well, okay, what do I need in my mobile recording studio? And how much time and effort do people need to put into pulling off this kind of strategy? Is it something that's going to be accessible to people?
Yeah. So the time investment we like to call out is about 2 hours per week to keep a show like this going. And that includes recruiting guests. That includes recording the show, assuming it's a weekly show. And that includes making sure the guests know when their episodes are posted, making sure that the episode gets posted. But that does not include, very importantly, if you want to really edit the episode heavily.
Got it. And
Because
you can
that's where your
outsource that.
cost is. Yeah.
Right.
And that's kind of what we assume is if you're in B2B or if you're wanting to start a podcast, if you're wanting to start new content streams, that you're already successful with sales to some extent, that you already have some baseline of revenue. And so you have enough to do some of the outsourcing. And we've got a whole playbook on the website about setting up a show like this.
Okay, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. That's fantastic. So this is not the, hey, I'm just getting started, let me do this. It's, I've done some things, kind of like you were saying, that original problem of the founder has done a bunch of sales and now that you need to grow and make it more scalable, here's where this can kick in.
Yeah, and that, especially for consultants, for coaches, for anyone with what I like to call an expert-run business, if you are not able to get to a stable income without any sales and marketing, if your network just isn't there, you might not have been working long enough.
Or you might not be calling your network. I run into people all the time who literally, most of the people they know have no idea what they're doing, and they wonder why it's hard to get those first few clients.
Yep. You got to have those first few. And that's really, I can't stress that enough, especially in something like digital marketing where I live most of my days. If you don't have a case study, you're not going to make sales.
Got it. Okay. So this is not at the very beginning, but it can be fairly close to the beginning as long as you've got a little bit of money, a little bit of time, and a little bit of success to back up what you're saying.
Yeah. Or if you still have a full-time job and you're looking to make that transition, then starting the show might be a good way to build out that network in preparation for.
Got it. Now, how does somebody know if sort of going down this podcasting route is going to be a good thing for them versus other investments in sales and marketing? Because I mean, it sounds reasonable. It's not the thing that you do right at the beginning when you haven't got your first client yet. That's fine. But if you have those first few clients and you are cash flow positive, you are profitable, there's going to be other marketing folks saying, well, you should be running more AdWords, you should be doing Twitter, you should be doing Facebook, you should hire a salesperson, right? How do you know whether, or do you know until you try it, whether this is the right avenue for you?
So there's really only one time when we know absolutely, certainly, it's a good avenue for you. And that's if you're selling to B2B technology companies. I can guarantee this is a worthwhile investment. There's a lot of demographics at play behind that. But we know that it works for that market. And we've seen success repeatedly with consultants who focus on local areas as well, and coaches. The other, really, the easier way to tell, is this worth me trying out, is you're going to want a 5-figure average client value. Because, at most you're going to get through 50 leads a year from this. We've actually got a calculator to help break down whether or not this is worthwhile in that playbook online, because this has come up so many times.
Got it.
But so we've got that 5-figure, and you want an industry that people actually care about PR.
Okay.
That's a huge one. So I work with some clients in like construction and mining and real estate where there's whole networks that explicitly do not want to be known.
So they're not a good fit for a podcast.
Exactly. Or at least not for this form of podcast.
Got it. So basically you want to make sure that if you basically land one client, you've paid for your investment.
Just about, yeah. 1-2 clients.
And then if you get 3 or 4, you're really rolling.
Yeah, because this is really designed for either on the SaaS side, this methodology is designed to get them a consistent flow of high-value leads while simultaneously creating a lot of content for them. And then for consultants and coaches, we really like this because it will get them the 3 or 4 more clients they need that year to continue growing their business successfully. And it will also give them enough content to put out a book.
Got it. Okay, so this is a great pivot because one of the things that strikes me as really interesting about this strategy is you don't actually care that much about the promotion of the podcast. You're not trying to get 100,000 listeners per episode. The guests you have on are the people you're trying to sell to anyway, which I think greatly simplifies things for people. But now, once you've done all that, you've got all this great content. How do you promote it? How do you reuse it? How do you make the most of it?
Yeah, repurposing is definitely number one.
Okay.
And that's, you might hear it called recycling. There's a dozen different terms. But at the end of the day, it's, look, you've got a lot of information from two people talking now. How do you turn that into other forms of the same thing?
Okay.
So how do we turn our 10 most successful interviews on sales for nerds into an ebook, or the 20 into a full-length book on advice from sales experts, right?
That's on my to-do list. Totally. I haven't made a lot of progress, but I'm in theory, I'm right there with you.
And that tends to be, for people that come to us with existing shows, that tends to be the case. And I can't count the number of times now where I've talked with a podcaster who's been podcasting for a year or two, and I haven't seen the success I wanted from my show. We don't get many downloads. We don't get the leads we want. Okay, well, who do you have on your show? Oh, well, you're not having on anyone who could actually buy from you. That's issue number one. And what are you doing after the show with that content? Are you planning ahead? No. Okay, well, you haven't really developed a way for your show to get value.
You checked a box and said, I have a podcast, but you haven't thought beyond that box, basically.
Yeah, and the podcasting strategy, especially the content strategy in how do you plan an arc of guests for a single topic, is very important, because if you are the person who chooses what guests come on when, then you have the ability to say, I want 6 guests who are sales experts for, let's say, you're a development agency who specializes in developing SaaS apps for Series A startups.
Okay.
That's going to be your niche. Well, let's have on half a dozen sales experts who specialize in that growth phase, and half a dozen marketing experts, and half a dozen DevOps experts, and build out this bank of expertise of interviews where we talk about these different subsections of what our audience is interested in. And then we're going to have 6 interviews with each. 6 interviews, if it's even only 30 minutes, that's going to be tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of words on a page when it's transcribed.
So basically, if you wanted to, you can take that and edit it, and you've got a book.
Yeah, and that's something we do pretty frequently, is, we'll pick out a group of episodes, or we'll plan a group of episodes ahead of time, and then take those transcripts, give them to an editor, and get it worked out.
Sounds like maybe what I ought to do.
It's how I've written all of our playbooks. They all start with me narrating.
Okay, so one thing is, and I'm guessing this is sort of like the more the heavy hitter, like the big repurposing is to turn it into a book. What are some of the other ways you can take that content and have it be useful?
Yeah, so I really love ebooks. They can be as big or as small as you want, and they're always great as sales collateral. Small videos have worked well for us. Obviously, a blog post, at least one from every episode. Those are really the biggest ones that we see. You can get a dozen social posts out of a single episode.
Sure.
No problem. And those can be video, those can be audio, those can be text. But the ebook has really been the thing we've settled on as the most effective.
Okay, great. I often love even smaller chunks, just call them lead magnets, like a checklist or something that's really easy to digest, especially for somebody who may be listening on a phone. Here are the 7 key lessons from this episode or whatever.
And we generally put a similar thing like that out as a blog post or show notes.
Got it. Okay. How's that whiskey treating you, by the way?
Excellent.
All right. Cheers. So let me make sure I've got this straight. If we've got a few clients, we've got a little bit of success, we're not complete lunatics pretending that we can solve a problem. We actually can't, but we want to solve more people's problems. We can go and invite maybe some of our past clients, some leading experts in the industry, some folks who are prime prospects, and basically have a podcast devoted to that topic. Am I following properly so far?
Yeah, and you touched on a really great point that I totally forgot about. Past clients.
Okay.
So when you launch a podcast, you have to have a certain number of episodes already there.
I've done everything wrong. Sorry, please continue.
So they changed this on Apple. I think they require 3 or 5 episodes now.
Okay.
They used to not require that. But now you literally have to have a certain number of episodes to launch.
Which is probably smart anyway.
Yeah, and you want to launch with more than that. We generally launch a show with at least 6.
Okay.
And we'll go up to 8 when we launch, because when somebody likes a show, they're going to try to listen to multiple episodes at once.
Right, okay. Great.
And so generally what we'll do is we'll record that 8 episodes and we'll put all those episodes out at once and they'll all get promoted at once, and that helps kick things off. And of those episodes, probably the first 5 or 6 are going to be friends, partners, clients. And so you're using that time to really prove your authority with those initial episodes, to maybe have somebody on where you've got more back and forth around those technical topics.
Okay.
We call these people allied guests that we bring on. So you have existing relationships with them. If you work with specific referral partners or partners just who you bring in on projects, having them on the show is a great way to put that introduction out there.
It makes them look good, makes them look like an expert, gives them some link juice and so on as well.
Yeah. And then having on past clients and doing kind of almost an audio case study.
Okay.
And so that we like to make sure that we talk about some of the work that the 2 organizations have done together.
How do you balance between getting the word out that you're an expert and you solve this problem for a real person and so on and so forth, not being too bashful, with also not making it just a boring sales pitch? Do you have any tips there?
Yeah, focus on the former. I really like to think of a podcast as selling yourself.
Okay.
It's not about selling the service. It's not about selling the product. It's about selling the people.
Okay.
Because that's really what the episode in this interview format is about, right? It's about our conversation.
So what should people think about when they're selling themselves? Because I think a lot of folks, especially if they're listening to Sales for Nerds, they may not be comfortable with sales in the first place, let alone even understand, well, how do I sell myself via a podcast?
So if you're a coach or consultant, just have a normal conversation like you would with a potential client.
Okay.
I cannot stress that enough. Coaches and consultants, their job is to talk already. It's to be an expert. And so all you need to do is be an expert in the room with the other person. And you're going to get that authority that they bring to the table, and they're going to get some of yours, and everyone will be happy.
So almost forget you've got a bunch of microphones and you're recording stuff. Just have a normal conversation.
Yeah, specifically forget if you're nervous.
Okay. Or have a glass of wine.
I actually used to do that before I would have some of my clients pitch in front of venture capitalists, is have the CEO down a shot and a Red Bull, get them amped up and loose, and they'll go out there and pitch naturally.
Got it. Okay. And then if you're not a coach or consultant, any different advice?
Yeah, you might not be talking for a living, so you don't have that fallback of just do what you do best. A few things. One, have a list of questions pre-prepared. You don't have to use them, but having them there will be of comfort.
Right. Okay.
2, prepare segues the same way. So whenever we're starting with a new host, we like to make sure they've got 2 to 4 transition segues they can use to get between topics within an episode. One of my personal favorites is switching gears.
You just say switching gears.
Yeah, and then move on to the next
Right.
thing. It doesn't have to be complex. And the goal with those is when you plan out a show ahead of time, you're probably planning in, anywhere from 2 to 5 segments that you're going to hit throughout that show, different mini topics that you want to make sure get brought up. And so these segues, these transitions make it easy for you to move from one to the other. And I highly recommend you have with each one of those, you also have a question to reframe the discussion.
Got it. Okay.
So you mentioned this, but could you tell me about how this impacts this other thing? And using that question to help move the conversation in the direction you'd like.
Okay, fantastic. So we've got a plan basically to record a bunch of podcasts, close some business directly out of those podcasts, hopefully get some referral business from some of those other folks who are not prospects, but they're allied guests who may then forward on to their friends and colleagues and so on. Then turn that content into other forms of content that can help with other marketing efforts. How can people find out more about this? Where can they find you?
Go to callforcontent.com and you'll find the playbooks on the site. We've got the Authority Marketing Playbook that focuses more on positioning and outreach and getting your name out there. We've got the B2B Podcast Playbook, which is specifically focused on developing a podcast for B2B lead gen. And we've got ones on podcast monetization and on ebook development as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for sharing your expertise with us. And I've got to go off and think about maybe I should be a little bit more strategic about Sales for Nerds.
That's what I like to hear.
Thanks. Cheers. Thanks for listening. If you have a friend who would benefit from this episode, please pass the word along. Have a friend who wouldn't benefit, but you haven't talked to in a while, give them a call. iTunes reviews are great to get the word out and help me create the show that's most useful to you. And if you're frustrated with your sales and marketing process or lack thereof, check out Mimrin, the CRM for people who hate selling. Until next time.